This is Alvin Mack, and he is known for being the craziest linebacker in all of college football.
Damn, I know you motherfucker. You the one got my baby sister pregnant. Ain't seen you around lately. Where you been, huh?
And Alvin is also one of the best linebackers in the country for Eastern State University. But many people don't realize about the hard work and dedication that he put in, along with the trials and tribulations that he had to endure in order to get to the situation that he was in now. So today, we are putting Alvin Mack into College Football 25. We're going to see just how much of a lunatic he really is, as we'll follow him on his road to glory. Coming out of high school, Alvin was actually the #1 linebacker in the country, so he knew it was going to be important for him to see the field, win a championship, and make it to the league someday. But unfortunately, Alvin Mack would lose a lot of his Power 5 offers due to an incident that occurred during his last game of his high school career. He was pretty upset about one of the referees making some bad calls throughout the game, so he ended up rushing the field and knocking the dog shit out the refs, which resulted in him being suspended for the high school playoffs and losing out on an offer from the one school that he always wanted to go to, Eastern State University. And they said the only way they'll allow him in is if he earns it via the transfer portal. And after seeing that there was actually one school that would not only allow him to start, but also had very similar colors to ESU, Alvin Mack just knew that when it came to his college decision, he had to sign with Minnesota. Going into the first practice, the Minnesota coaching staff knew that Alvin was good, but they didn't know that he would be this dominant. So there was absolutely no question about him being the starter. And that's great because this is something that Alvin had continuously worked hard for, and he was just ready to get into his very first game as a college football player against North Carolina. Now, to start his career off, this game speed wasn't something that Alvin was quite used to yet. He was still getting comfortable with reading the plays and picking up on the offensive cues, so he wasn't really making much of an impact during his first drive out on the field, as North Carolina would eventually drive down the field and get themselves in the end zone for a touchdown to start this season off. But it was all good though, because Alvin was already feeling like he was picking up some things from this offense. He even dropped back in the coverage and said, "Wang!" Getting his first career interception right here in the second quarter. And Alvin just has a feeling that this won't be the last big play that he makes. And it definitely wasn't, because he was continuously helping to make plays in the backfield throughout the second quarter. And unfortunately for them, he actually recognized the North Carolina quarterback from somewhere.
Hey, Potter Pop, you the white boy ratting my brother out. Send him to jail.
Blue 30.
I'm gonna make you pay. You hear me, Potter Pop? I'm gonna make you filming.
Now, I don't know if Alvin really knew the guy, but he definitely did on this play, because he brings him down to the ground before rubbing his nuts all over his helmet as he gets him down for a sack. And at this point, Alvin Mack was really feeling himself. He was out here making plays, but it was too bad that his teammates couldn't really keep up. So Alvin started to realize that he needed to do a lot of the work himself. So he jumped back and snatched this ball out the air, coming up with his second interception in as many quarters, and it seems like he's single-handedly putting the straps on North Carolina. But unfortunately for Minnesota, and luckily for North Carolina, there are not 11 Alvin Macks out there on the field. So throughout the second half, North Carolina would try to adjust and get the ball out quickly before actually getting themselves in the end zone for another touchdown on the game, as they tie it up at 14. And then when it hit the fourth quarter, Minnesota actually got the lead right back. But North Carolina clearly wasn't having all that, as they were running the ball right down Minnesota's throat, and even brought it all the way down to the 1-yard line, where it would only be one play later that they got themselves in the end zone for another touchdown, tying this game up at 21. And after Minnesota fails to score any points, Alvin was doing everything he could to make sure that North Carolina didn't gain another damn yard. But Alvin knew what kind of team he chose to play for, and he would have had to have been much better to win this game, because North Carolina would go on to close it out 24-21. And although Alvin Mack had a great stat line with 2 interceptions, a sack, and 3 tackles for loss, he just knew that he had to be better, and he knew he was going to be better, going into his next game against FCS East. To start this game off, Alvin was fighting off a blocker in order to go combine for a sack to help put this first drive away. But after a while, Alvin realized that it was pretty easy to get off these blockers, and he didn't think that any of these guys could stop him without double teaming. But it didn't really seem to be much of a thought anymore, as it was more of reality, because Alvin Mack was absolutely demolishing this offensive line. And it would only get worse when the opposing team was continuously ignoring Alvin.
Oh, come on, don't punk out behind that mask now. Answer me, motherfucker, before I peel your cow.
Which pretty obviously was a terrible idea, because all it did was just make Alvin angrier. as he and this Minnesota defense would barely allow FCS East to get past midfield throughout the entire second half. And in the fourth quarter, after Alvin just tosses the center aside and absolutely obliterates the quarterback, Alvin Mack could pretty much just take a seat and rest his crazy ass up, because this game was over, as Minnesota would go on to win 31-0, with Alvin Mack going for 14 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks, having an absolute monster of a game, and these are the kind of performances that he's expecting. He even went on to win National Defensive Player of the Week for his effort, and he knew this was the kind of thing he had to keep doing in order to get himself to ESU. For now though, he was looking to stay as locked in as he could with the guys that he was with, as he was always working hard with them to study plays. So this Alvin Mack-led Minnesota defense went into their next game looking to wreak some havoc, as they were set to face off against Nevada. This defense came out playing pretty well, but they did let up a big first down. So Alvin Mack had to change that by forcing this fumble and giving his team the ball right back, starting this game out with some excellent momentum. But unfortunately, the Minnesota offense wasn't really able to capitalize on that, and this Minnesota defense was just watching as the momentum was slipping away. Luckily, this defense would buckle down and come up with a big stop on third down to end the drive, but Minnesota would give them the ball right back with excellent field position. So Alvin had to lock in and start making plays in the backfield, coming up with a big tackle for loss. But for whatever reason, they thought it was a good idea to put Alvin in at cornerback, and whoop-de-fucking-do, the 250-pound linebacker gets cooked, allowing a huge gain for Nevada right before they were eventually able to find a man open in the end zone for a touchdown, taking the lead in this game. Now, just because it was 10-0, it didn't mean that Alvin was going to stop trying. So he continuously smacked the running back in the backfield for tackles for loss, and he was inspiring his defense to play a little bit better than they have been. So much so that a cornerback actually comes up with an interception, and he has taken this one all the way back with a bunch of green grass ahead of him, as he pretty much just walks into the end zone for a touchdown, bringing us to a 7-10 ball game. And Minnesota would continue to capitalize on this momentum all the way up until the fourth quarter, where they had actually taken the lead, putting up 21 points, and Nevada on an opportunity to get themselves in the end zone for a touchdown to potentially tie the game up, were looking like that was exactly what they were about to go do, and they actually did score a touchdown that put them in a position to potentially tie the game. But ultimately, Nevada did not have enough good drives to win this game, as Minnesota would barely win 21-19, as Alvin Mack goes for 7 total tackles, 3 of them being in the backfield. And since Alvin was playing so well, he had no problem treating himself to a little party here and there. But one thing he did have a problem with was doing his classwork though, and he actually hates it when his teammates make fun of him about how he can't read.
Of course, he still gotta have somebody read him to him.
Fuck you, doughboy. I can read. See that shoe? It says Adidas.
Now look, everybody knows that Alvin Mack can't read. I don't even know why he tried to lie, but that's okay though, because one thing that he can do is rush the quarterback, and he was definitely looking forward to doing that in his next game against Iowa. Minnesota's defense was definitely struggling throughout the first half of this game, allowing Iowa to drive their way all the way towards field goal range, where they would eventually get stopped on third down. But Minnesota's offense wasn't really doing any favors, as they were continuously allowing great field position, and eventually Iowa would capitalize on it as they threw it to the corner of the end zone and threw a touchdown, taking a 10-0 lead. But Alvin Mack knew after halftime that the only way that Minnesota wins this game is if he starts putting an end to Iowa drives, getting a big stop on third down to allow Minnesota to eventually score a field goal, making this a one-possession game before Alvin Mack drops back into coverage and says, "Mwah," picking his ball off and taking it back to the Iowa 20 to give his team great field position. Now, unfortunately, this Minnesota offense was unable to put up a touchdown at all in this game, meaning that with 2 minutes left, this Minnesota defense was left to come up with a stop to give their offense another opportunity, which they eventually do. And now all this offense has to do is just go down the field and score a field goal, which eventually they don't, meaning that Minnesota would go on to lose this game by 1 point, 9-10, with Alvin Mack having another good game with 1 interception, 1 tackle for loss, and 1 sack. And Alvin had actually taken a lot of blame for this loss. He knows that this team can't really win close games like this if he doesn't play better. And he knows they also can't afford to take another loss, as they'll most certainly be pushed out of the college football playoff picture. So Alvin is feeling the pressure of trying to have his best game in his next one against top-ranked Michigan. Now, this game did not get off to the start that Alvin Mack wanted it to, because Michigan was pretty much having their way with this defense and was actually able to get themselves in the end zone on their very first possession of the game, taking the early 7-0 lead. But with the help of Alvin Mack making stops in the backfield for loss, This defense was eventually able to come up with a big-time stop on third down, allowing the offense an opportunity to tie the game up. But instead of that, they actually just gave the ball right back inside the goal-to-goal territory. So that Michigan had a pretty easy time just waltzing their way into the end zone for a touchdown, extending their lead further in the second quarter. And if it wasn't for Alvin Mack, they probably would have scored another touchdown before half. Luckily, they hold Michigan to a field goal to keep it at a two-possession game. But right after halftime, they kept their foot on the gas and got in for another touchdown to put up 24 points. And at this point, Alvin was starting to accept that this Minnesota offense was not going to score at all throughout the rest of the game. And quite honestly, this just made him angry and fueled him to actually be better, as he comes up with a big-time sack at the end of the third quarter on second down. But in a game where it seemed like Alvin Mack was the only one out there trying to play defense, unsurprisingly, it wouldn't really go well, as Michigan would end up closing out this game a lot to a little, with Alvin Mack having had another great performance with no victory to show for it. And Alvin had let the entire locker room know exactly how he felt about the season.
Shit. Whole fucking season down the drain.
But on top of that, Alvin wasn't doing so great with his schooling, so he had to go ahead and get himself a tutor.
Which two city-states fought in the Punic Wars?
I don't know. Detroit and Buffalo?
Now, to be fair, I don't even know what the Punic War is either, but that's neither here nor there. Because as of right now, Alvin Mack is focused on snapping this losing streak for Minnesota, and he's looking to help do exactly that going into his next game against USC. Now, one thing that Alvin had struggled with all year was penalties. Whether it was unnecessary roughness or starting off sides, it was no different here. But those penalties weren't really stopping Alvin from dropping back into coverage and saying, "Hey, ya!" Coming up with a big interception where he actually pitches it and comes up with a couple extra yards. But this game would only get worse for USC, as it turns out that Alvin Mack actually recognizes their running back.
Hey, pay attention when I'm talking to you, nigga.
What?
You're the guy who shot my mother, aren't you?
Shut up, man. You knew I never knew your mother.
Now, whether or not he knew his mother, Alvin didn't give a damn, because he came right out and shot the other running back, forcing him to fumble, and luckily USC picks it up. But that's definitely a hit that dude's going to be feeling tomorrow. And with the USC quarterback feeling absolutely petrified about what he just saw, he just wants to get off the field, so he throws a pick to Minnesota. And with Alvin Mack actually coming out to be the lead blocker, he eventually ends up springing this guy loose, coming up with a big block that allows him to go all the way towards the end zone for a touchdown, taking the lead in this game over USC, all thanks to Alvin Mack. But unfortunately, this lead would not last for long because USC would go right back down the field and score a touchdown to tie it up. And although Minnesota's offense was putting up some points, it seems like USC had started to figure out their defense, because they were driving up and down the field with ease throughout the second half, and eventually got in for a touchdown to tie the game up. And really, no matter what Alvin Mack did, it just wasn't going to be enough in this game, because with USC's offense being so dynamic, and Minnesota's offense only able to put up 10 points throughout the game, well, that right there is a recipe for a loss, as Minnesota would go on to lose this game 17-21. With Alvin Mack having played his heart out once again with 5 tackles for loss and 1 interception. He actually went on to win National Defensive Player of the Week once again for his performance. But after taking yet another loss, he can't help but feel like he should be playing better. And even though he was actually starting to get some consideration for the Heisman Trophy, he knew the only way to eventually earn it was to keep dominating in his next game against UCLA. Now, this was a game where Alvin didn't really have to do much, because UCLA did not come locked in, and they didn't really lock in at all until the second quarter, where they would finally put up their first points right before halftime, with a touchdown to make it a 2-possession game. But with Alvin Mack and the rest of this Minnesota defense swarming throughout this game, it wasn't even relatively a close one. So after Alvin Mack destroys the offensive line and the quarterback on this play, that would pretty much put this game away, as Minnesota would go on to win 24-16. With Alvin Mack having a light game by his standards, but still had 2 tackles for loss and a sack. And now going into the back half of his season, he was starting to feel like he was really getting things going. And he had a real interesting answer when a reporter asked him what's his game plan going forward.
Kill the quarterback. Hit the tight end so hard his girlfriend died. Kill everybody.
So he went into his next game against Maryland with the mindset that he was going to kill everything. But unfortunately for Maryland, Alvin had recognized one of them for trying to steal his sister's car.
You were trying to steal a fucking car, you cocksucker. Bring that thing. You didn't think I was gonna find you, did you? But I got you now, nigga. I'm gonna bust your gut open and watch you die.
Nah, see, Alvin came out in this game acting like a fucking lunatic, bringing the quarterback down to the ground on the very first play of the game. Little did he know that he actually set the tone for the rest of it. Because whether it was him making a nice play in the backfield, or him saying, "Wang," picking off a pass and giving his team the ball back, he was making plays all over the field. even coming up with another pick in the second quarter, taking away another possession for Maryland. And at this point, he was just having his way with them. He even almost came up with yet another pick in the second quarter. But even though he didn't make the play right there, it was all good, because he was about to make another play as he shuts off a blocker and sacks the quarterback for a fumble. And Minnesota would end up recovering, making it his third forced turnover of the game. But Alvin Mack was still not done yet, because why not come out for your fourth forced turnover of the game, picking off yet another pass here in the fourth quarter, taking away a lot of hope from that Maryland sideline. But any hope they had left would be obliterated just like this wide receiver, as Alvin Mack absolutely demolishes this guy and puts an end to this game, as Minnesota would end up dominating 27-3, in a game where Alvin Mack had 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 3 interceptions, along with 1 forced fumble. So based off those stats, it was actually no surprise to him that he won National Defensive Player of the Week. And at this point, Alvin had entered a full-on flow state, because he went into his next game against Illinois looking to bash some heads. And safe to say, he was succeeding. Alvin would come out in a game against Illinois and make a ton of plays all over the field, including one right here in the fourth quarter where Alvin actually comes up with a pick that not only forces the turnover but ends up closing this game out, as Minnesota would go on to win 20-14. And he wanted to keep that momentum going into the next game against Rutgers, where Alvin Mack and this Minnesota defense had come up with some lucky stops, but they had also come up with some stops that had everything to do with pure heart and determination. As Alvin Mack picks this ball off, and he is taking this one all the way back before actually pitching the ball back, landing in the hands of a linebacker who actually loses some yards on the play. But that was more than all good, because Alvin Mack was coming to kill that quarterback, especially after he bumped into Alvin after the play. Oh yeah, he knew he was going to get back for that. Luckily for Rutgers though, they were able to break off a huge run right here on this play, one of the longest plays Minnesota's given up in a while, as the running back gets in for a long touchdown to make it a 10-point game. But just like Alvin Mack thought he would, he got right to that quarterback and reminded him of exactly who he was talking to. And just in case he forgot, Alvin had to make sure to get in there one more time to bring him down to the ground. Now unfortunately, Minnesota's offense was catastrophically down atrocious in this game, so they would actually go on to lose 13-3, with Alvin Mack going for 2.5 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and an interception. And at this point, despite the loss, Alvin knows what's more important is getting his stats up so that he could potentially win a Heisman and earn the right to transfer to ESU. But in order to do that, he had to play very well against the top-ranked opponent, Penn State. And this is a game where Alvin Mack came out immediately making an impact. And only if he wasn't 250 pounds of pure titanium steel muscle, he probably would have been able to take this one all the way back to the crib for his first touchdown. But he does get celebrated by the crowd for his 10th career interception. And with this Minnesota defense playing surprisingly well in this first half, that would leave Penn State down by multiple possessions in the second quarter. And after Drew Allard gets sacked and fumbles, it is Alvin Mack who actually picks it up, and he is taking it to the crib, finally getting in for his first career touchdown, as he's always been too slow to bring back a pick six, but this was the opportunity that he had earned all season. And with that, the momentum was heavily in Minnesota's favor, especially after Alvin comes up with another interception. Alvin even went out there and said, "Hey," juking out a player before going down at the 35. But after coming up with his 3rd interception of the day, that would absolutely put this game away. As led by an incredible performance from Alvin Mack, Minnesota would go on to win this game 33-14. And Alvin Mack didn't even get in the backfield once, he just had a bunch of interceptions. After the game, one of Alvin's teammates let him know that he'll be transferring. But it was all good because Alvin let him know right back that he's going to be gone too, especially after he goes out there and potentially wins this Heisman Trophy. All he had to do was just go out there in his last game of the season and finish it strong, as he and the Minnesota Gophers were set to face off against the Wisconsin Honey Badgers. Now, Alvin Mack came out in this game doing what he usually does, laying the boom on opposing players, and the rest of the defense was doing something similar as they actually brought the quarterback down to the ground on 3rd down. Wisconsin didn't really start getting anything going until later in the second quarter, where they picked up some big yardage on this lucky-ass catch. Unluckily for them though, that drive would only result in a field goal. And even though they drove right back down the field, their luck had seemed to be completely out, because Alvin Mack had eventually come up with another interception on his season, making a big play in his own red zone to strap up this Wisconsin offense. And throughout the second half, Alvin Mack just seemed furious, because he was out here making a big play every other down, and it looked like he was trying to take his anger out on a Wisconsin wide receiver.
You wanna have 250 pounds of pissed off nigga? Go ahead.
And if not the receiver, he was also targeting the running back too, because he ended up knocking that motherfucker straight into the offseason. And after Alvin Mack comes out on third down, drops back into coverage and snatches this ball out the air, that would not only put an end to this game, but it would put an end to the Minnesota regular season, and what could actually be their final game of their season, as Minnesota would go on to win this game 13-6, with Alvin Mack winning his first player of the game in the last game of the season, likely because of his tackle for loss and 2 interceptions, and he had won Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week for their performance. But now that it was the end of the year, he knew that Minnesota wasn't even close to sniffing the conference championship, and they probably weren't even in the top 50, let alone the top 25. But since it was the end of the year, it was now time for the awards, and Alvin was not surprised to find out that he had actually won Player of the Year. Considering he had 32 tackles for losses and 4 forced fumbles, it's understandable. But he really did not expect for him to go ahead and win the Heisman Trophy, becoming Minnesota's first Heisman Trophy winner since 1941 when Bruce Smith won it. White Bruce Smith, not this guy. But whether you're talking about vanilla or chocolate Bruce Smith, this is excellent company for Alvin Mack to be in, as he would go on to win a bunch of other awards as well. But better yet, he found out that he would actually be able to play in another game in the LA Bowl. And at first he didn't know if he wanted to risk his health, but Alvin is the definition of a competitor. So he planned on coming out in his last game with the Minnesota uniform on, ready to lead his team to another victory against Wyoming. An emphasis on the leading part because he had some words for his team before the game.
60 minutes falls out. Let's open up the whole can of kick ass and kill them all. Let the paramedics sort them out.
And on his very first play of the game, although there were no paramedics required, Alvin Mack would go on to say, "Mwang!" coming up with a pick in the first quarter to set the tone for the rest of the game. But after a lineman had gotten Alvin's face, oh no, they pretty much awakened the dragon at that point. Because if Alvin Mack wasn't going to do something about it, he had a bunch of other guys on that front seven ready to die behind him. But they were going to make sure that quarterback dies first as they brought him down to the ground on back-to-back plays. And at this point, you can see very clearly that the quarterback is scared shitless because he throws the ball right to Alvin Mack as he comes up with his second interception before the half. By the third quarter, it was already 24-0 Minnesota. And this Wyoming running back can run, but he definitely cannot hide from Alvin Mack. And really nobody could, especially not the quarterback, as Alvin just runs him into his teammate, who ended up bringing him down for another sack. And I ain't even gonna lie to you guys, I kind of feel for that Wyoming quarterback, because I would personally be petrified if I saw Alvin Mack running my way like this. On fourth down, this Alvin Mack pass rush causes an interception that took away a possession from Wyoming and eventually made this a 38-0 game. And after Alvin Mack takes it upon himself to kill the quarterback one more time, that would effectively end this game. It would finally wrap up Alvin Mack's season, as Minnesota would go on to win this bowl game 38-0, with Alvin Mack leading the way with 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 2 interceptions. Now, as far as his season stats, Alvin Mack had an incredible year, coming up with 35 tackles for loss and 12.5 sacks. But really the most impressive stat was the fact that he had 16 interceptions as a middle linebacker. Literally the definition of a user lurk, and it seems to be true as he actually broke the national record for the most interceptions in a season. But not just that, because he actually broke the career interception record for Minnesota, pretty much instantly establishing himself as the best middle linebacker in Minnesota's history. But now that this season was finally over, as much as Alvin Mack appreciates his time with Minnesota, he knows that it's finally time for him to hit the transfer portal. And now that he's got all of his scholarship offers back, he knows exactly where he's gonna go. So when it came to Alvin Mack's sophomore year college decision, he decided to sign with Eastern State University, baby, ESU. And if you want to see Alvin Mack continue his journey with the Wolves, be sure to get this video to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. And definitely take the time to comment down below who else you guys want to see next. And don't forget to watch some of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point in the video, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I hope all of your college football and NFL teams win this weekend. And other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.